The desert sun blazed mercilessly over forward operating Base Delta, casting long shadows across the compound where hundreds of soldiers went about their daily routines. Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his brow as he supervised the unloading of supply trucks that had just arrived from the main base. The temperature had already climbed past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and it wasn't even noon yet. Thompson had been stationed at this remote outpost for 8 months now, serving as the non-commissioned officer in charge of logistics operations. He was known among his peers as a competent soldier, though some whispered about his quick temper and tendency to lose control when things didn't go according to plan. His superiors had noted this in his performance reviews, but his technical skills and dedication to duty had always overshadowed these concerns. On this particular morning, Private First Class Sarah Martinez was assigned to Thompson's detail. Martinez had joined the unit just 3 weeks earlier, fresh out of advanced individual training and eager to prove herself in her first deployment. She was meticulous in her work, double-checking inventory lists and ensuring every piece of equipment was properly cataloged and stored. Her attention to detail was both an asset and, in Thompson's opinion, sometimes an annoyance when it slowed down operations. The supply convoy had brought in critical medical supplies, ammunition, and food rations that needed to be distributed immediately to various sections of the base. Thompson had been working with minimal sleep for the past 72 hours due to increased operational tempo, and the stress was beginning to show. His usual patience had worn thin, and small mistakes that he might normally overlook were now sources of significant irritation. Martinez was carefully checking serial numbers on medical equipment when Thompson noticed she was taking longer than usual. The other soldiers in the detail had already moved on to unloading the next truck, but Martinez remained focused on her clipboard, verifying each item against the shipping manifest. In her thoroughness, she had discovered a discrepancy in the inventory count that could indicate missing supplies. "Thompson, I think we have a problem here," Martinez called out, her voice barely audible over the rumble of diesel engines and shouting soldiers. "The manifest shows 15 trauma kits, but I've only counted 12. We need to double-check this before signing off on the delivery." Thompson turned toward her, his jaw already clenched with frustration. In his mind, Martinez was creating unnecessary delays over what was probably just a paperwork error. The other trucks needed to be unloaded, and he had a deadline to meet before the afternoon briefing with the company commander. Every minute they spent recounting supplies was a minute lost from their tight schedule. "Private Martinez, just mark it as received and move on," Thompson ordered, his voice carrying the authority of his rank and the edge of his growing impatience. "We don't have time to nitpick every small discrepancy. The convoy needs to be processed and ready to roll back to main base within the hour." Martinez looked up from her clipboard, confusion evident on her face. She had been trained to follow proper procedures, and accepting a shipment with known discrepancies went against everything she had learned. The missing trauma kits could mean the difference between life and death for wounded soldiers, and she couldn't understand why Thompson would want to overlook such an important shortage. "But, Staff Sergeant, these are medical supplies," Martinez replied, maintaining her respectful tone despite her concern. "If we're missing trauma kits and someone gets wounded, we might not have the equipment needed to save their life. Shouldn't we contact the supply depot and verify what happened to the missing items?" Thompson's face reddened as he felt his authority being questioned in front of the other soldiers. Several privates and corporals were within earshot, and he believed that Martinez's persistence was undermining his leadership in front of his subordinates. The heat, lack of sleep, and mounting pressure from multiple operational demands had pushed him to his breaking point. The base around them continued its normal operations, with soldiers conducting training exercises, maintenance crews working on vehicles, and security teams manning their posts along the perimeter. None of them were aware of the tension building between Thompson and Martinez over what seemed like a routine supply check. Martinez stood her ground, clutching her clipboard and looking directly at Thompson. Her commitment to following proper procedures wasn't intended as disrespect, but rather as the responsible action of a soldier doing her job correctly. She had been taught that accountability for equipment and supplies was crucial to mission success and soldier safety. "Private, I gave you a direct order," Thompson said, his voice rising above the ambient noise of the base. "Mark the shipment as complete and move to the next truck. I don't want to hear another word about your count. We have a job to do, and your delays are affecting the entire operation. The other soldiers in the detail began to notice the escalating tension between their NCO and the new private. Some continued working while keeping one eye on the developing situation, while others slowed their pace to better observe what was happening. The atmosphere in the supply area became noticeably more tense as Thompson's voice grew louder and more aggressive. Martinez felt the eyes of her fellow soldiers on her and realized she was in a difficult position. Her training told her to maintain accountability for the equipment, but military hierarchy demanded obedience to the orders of her superior. She took a deep breath and made one final attempt to address her concerns through proper channels. "Staff Sergeant Thompson, with respect, I understand the time pressure we're under," Martinez said carefully, trying to maintain her composure. "But I believe we have a responsibility to ensure accurate accountability for medical supplies. Perhaps we could quickly radio the depot to clarify the shipment count while the other soldiers continue with the remaining trucks?" Thompson's anger reached a boiling point. In his mind, Martinez had now directly challenged his authority multiple times in front of his soldiers. The combination of exhaustion, heat, and operational stress clouded his judgment completely. Without thinking about the consequences of his actions, he took several quick steps toward Martinez, closing the distance between them in seconds. The base continued its normal rhythm around them, but, in that small section of the supply yard, time seemed to slow as Thompson's hand rose and struck Martinez across the side of her head with enough force to knock her sideways. The clipboard flew from her hands, papers scattering in the desert wind as she stumbled and fell to her knees on the rough concrete. The sound of the blow echoed in the immediate area, and every soldier within sight stopped what they were doing. The supply yard fell silent except for the distant hum of generators and air conditioning units. Martinez remained on the ground for several seconds, her hand pressed to her head where Thompson had struck her, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Thompson immediately realized the magnitude of what he had done. His anger evaporated instantly, replaced by a growing sense of dread as he looked around at the faces of the soldiers who had witnessed his action. The military justice system had zero tolerance for violence against subordinates, and striking a soldier under his command was a serious criminal offense that could end his career and result in imprisonment. Several soldiers rushed to Martinez's aid, helping her to her feet and checking to ensure she wasn't seriously injured. Martinez stood unsteadily, still holding her head, but appeared to be physically unharmed beyond what would likely become a significant bruise. However, the psychological impact of being struck by her superior in front of her peers was evident in her shaken demeanor and the tears that had begun to form in her eyes. Corporal James Wilson, who had been working nearby, immediately approached Thompson. Wilson was a veteran soldier with multiple deployments and a reputation for integrity. He had witnessed the entire incident from beginning to end and knew that what had just occurred required immediate reporting through the chain of command. "Staff Sergeant, you need to step away from the area right now," Wilson said firmly but quietly. "Private Martinez, you need to report to the medics for evaluation. I'm going to notify the first sergeant immediately about what just happened here." Thompson nodded slowly, his face now pale despite the desert heat. He looked at Martinez, who was being assisted by other soldiers, and realized there was nothing he could say or do to undo what had just occurred. The incident had been witnessed by too many people to cover up or explain away, and he knew his military career was likely over. As Wilson escorted Martinez toward the base medical facility, other soldiers began securing the scattered paperwork and continuing with the supply operation under the supervision of Corporal Davis, the next senior NCO present. The news of what had happened spread quickly through the informal communication networks that existed in every military unit. Within minutes of the incident, multiple soldiers had already begun discussing what they had witnessed. In today's military, incidents involving violence against subordinates, especially those involving male soldiers striking female soldiers, were treated with the utmost seriousness. The witnesses knew that their testimony would be crucial in the investigation that would inevitably follow. Thompson remained in the supply area, standing alone near the truck where the incident had occurred. He was acutely aware that his life was about to change dramatically, and that the consequences of his moment of lost control would extend far beyond his own career. The reputation of his unit, his commander, and, potentially the entire base could be affected by his actions. The desert wind continued to blow across the base, carrying with it the scattered inventory sheets that had fallen when Martinez dropped her clipboard. As Thompson watched the papers tumble across the compound, he realized that his single moment of violence had set in motion a chain of events that would soon bring the highest levels of military leadership to this remote outpost. Unknown to Thompson, Martinez, or any of the soldiers at Forward Operating Base Delta, the incident they had just witnessed would soon draw the attention of three of the most powerful generals in the theater of operations, and would result in changes that would affect military policies and procedures for years to come. First Sergeant Michael Rodriguez had been in the middle of reviewing personnel files when Corporal Wilson knocked on his office door with an urgency that immediately caught his attention. Rodriguez had served in the Army for 19 years, working his way up through the enlisted ranks, and had developed an instinct for recognizing when something serious had occurred. Wilson's expression and body language told him this wasn't a routine matter. "First Sergeant, I need to report an incident that just occurred in the supply yard," Wilson said, his voice steady but tense. Staff Sergeant Thompson struck Private Martinez during a disagreement about supply accountability. Multiple soldiers witnessed the incident, and Private Martinez has been taken to the medical facility for evaluation. Rodriguez felt his stomach drop. In his nearly 2 decades of military service, he had seen careers destroyed and lives ruined by moments of poor judgment, but incidents involving violence against subordinates were among the most serious offenses in the military justice system. He immediately understood that this wasn't just a disciplinary matter that could be handled at the company level, it would require immediate notification up the chain of command and would likely result in a formal investigation. "Corporal Wilson, I need you to provide me with a detailed written statement of everything you observed," Rodriguez said, already reaching for his phone to contact the company commander. "Include the time, location, names of all witnesses, and exactly what you saw happen. Do not discuss this incident with anyone else until you've been interviewed by the investigating officer." While Wilson began writing his statement, Rodriguez contacted Captain Jennifer Hayes, the company commander, and briefed her on the incident. Hayes had been preparing for a routine afternoon briefing with battalion headquarters when she received the call that would completely change the trajectory of her day and, potentially, her career. As a commander, she was held responsible for the actions of all soldiers under her command, and incidents of this nature reflected directly on her leadership. Captain Hayes immediately ordered Thompson to be confined to his quarters pending investigation and directed that Martinez receive a complete medical evaluation. She also initiated the process for requesting a formal investigation under Article 15 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, knowing that the incident would need to be reported to higher headquarters within hours of its occurrence. Meanwhile, in the base medical facility, Martinez sat on an examination table while Staff Sergeant Lisa Chen, the senior medic on duty, conducted a thorough evaluation. Martinez had a visible bruise forming on the left side of her head where Thompson had struck her, but showed no signs of concussion or serious injury. However, Chen was more concerned about the psychological trauma of the incident and recommended that Martinez speak with the base chaplain or mental health counselor. "Private Martinez, I need to document your injuries for the official record," Chen explained as she photographed the bruise and completed her medical report. "This documentation will be crucial for any legal proceedings that may result from this incident. I also want you to know that what happened to you is completely unacceptable, and the command will take appropriate action." Martinez nodded quietly, still processing the shock of being struck by her superior. She had joined the military with high expectations and a strong sense of duty, and the incident had shattered some of her trust in the system she had pledged to serve. The support she was receiving from other soldiers and medical personnel was helping, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her military career had been fundamentally altered by those few seconds in the supply yard. News of the incident spread throughout the base with remarkable speed, as it always did when something significant occurred in the close-knit military community. Soldiers discussed the incident in hushed conversations during meals, while conducting maintenance on their equipment, and during their off-duty hours. The fact that Thompson had struck a female subordinate made the incident even more serious in the eyes of many soldiers, who recognized that it would likely result in severe consequences. Captain Hayes spent the remainder of the afternoon on the phone with various levels of command, briefing them on the incident and coordinating the response. Her first call was to Lieutenant Colonel David Park, the battalion commander, who immediately recognized the potential implications of the incident. Park had been dealing with increased scrutiny from higher headquarters regarding the treatment of female soldiers, and he knew that this incident would draw significant attention from the highest levels of command. "Captain Hayes, I want a complete investigation initiated immediately," Park ordered during their phone conversation. "This incident needs to be handled by the book, with full transparency and accountability. I'm going to brief the brigade commander within the hour, and I expect this will generate interest from even higher levels of command." Lieutenant Colonel Park's prediction proved accurate. When he briefed Colonel Sarah Williams, the brigade commander, about the incident, her immediate concern was not just about the specific case but about the broader implications for military culture and the treatment of female soldiers throughout the theater. Williams had been working on initiatives to improve the integration and protection of female soldiers in combat zones, and this incident represented exactly the type of problem she was trying to prevent. "David, this incident is going to generate significant attention," Williams told Park during their secure video conference. "I need you to ensure that every aspect of this investigation is conducted properly and that the victim receives all appropriate support. I'm going to brief General Martinez at division headquarters tonight, and I suspect this will go even higher than that." General Robert Martinez, the division commander, was reviewing operational reports in his headquarters compound when he received the call from Colonel Williams. Martinez was a three-star general with over 30 years of military experience, and he had been personally involved in developing new policies and procedures for addressing incidents of violence and misconduct in the ranks. When Williams briefed him on the Thompson-Martinez incident, he immediately understood its potential significance. "Sarah, I want you to understand that this type of incident has the potential to undermine everything we've been working toward in terms of military culture and the integration of female soldiers," General Martinez said during their conversation. "I'm going to brief the theater commander first thing tomorrow morning, and I suspect this will end up on the desk of some very senior people in Washington." General Martinez was correct in his assessment. The incident at Forward Operating Base Delta occurred during a period when the Department of Defense was under intense scrutiny from Congress and the media regarding the treatment of female soldiers and the military's handling of misconduct cases. Several high-profile incidents in recent months had resulted in congressional hearings and demands for policy changes, making any new incident involving violence against female soldiers a matter of significant concern at the highest levels. That evening, General Martinez contacted General Patricia Thompson, the theater commander and a four-star general who oversaw all military operations in the region. General Thompson had been dealing with increasing pressure from the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff to address cultural issues within the military, and the incident at Forward Operating Base Delta represented exactly the type of problem that could result in policy changes and command restructuring. "Bob, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention immediately," General Thompson told General Martinez during their secure communication. "Given the current environment and the scrutiny we're under regarding these types of incidents, I'm going to personally involve myself in ensuring this is handled properly. I want a complete review of the incident, the response, and the command climate at that base." General Thompson's decision to personally involve herself in the incident was unprecedented. Theater commanders typically dealt with strategic-level operations and policy issues, not individual disciplinary matters involving non-commissioned officers. However, the political and social climate surrounding military culture issues had elevated incidents like the Thompson-Martinez case to the highest levels of military leadership. Within hours of the incident, word had reached the Pentagon, where senior officials in the Office of the Secretary of Defense were briefed on the details. The incident was added to a growing list of cases that were being tracked by congressional liaison offices and media relations personnel, all of whom recognized the potential for public attention and political consequences. Back at Forward Operating Base Delta, Thompson remained confined to his quarters, aware that his actions had triggered a response that went far beyond anything he could have imagined. He had struck Martinez in a moment of anger and poor judgment, thinking only about the immediate situation and his frustration with what he perceived as insubordination. He had no way of knowing that his actions would soon bring three of the most powerful generals in the military to his remote base. Martinez, meanwhile, was receiving support from the chaplain, mental health personnel, and fellow soldiers who wanted to ensure she knew that the incident was not her fault and that the command was taking appropriate action. However, she was also beginning to understand that the incident had taken on a life of its own, and that she would likely be at the center of an investigation and review process that could last for months. The base commander, Colonel James Anderson, had been attending a conference at division headquarters when the incident occurred, but he cut his trip short and returned immediately upon being briefed. Anderson knew that his command would be scrutinized intensively, and that the way he handled the investigation and response would be crucial to his own career and the reputation of his base. As the sun set over Forward Operating Base Delta on that fateful day, none of the soldiers going about their evening routines could have imagined that their remote outpost was about to become the focus of attention from the highest levels of military command. The incident in the supply yard had set in motion a chain of events that would bring unprecedented scrutiny to their operations and result in changes that would affect military culture for years to come. The stage was now set for a response that would demonstrate just how seriously the military leadership took incidents of violence and misconduct, and how quickly the highest levels of command would act when the fundamental values of the military were threatened by the actions of individual soldiers. At exactly 0600 hours the following morning, General Patricia Thompson stood in her command center reviewing overnight reports from across the theater of operations. The incident at Forward Operating Base Delta had occupied much of her thoughts throughout the night, not because of its operational significance, but because of its potential impact on military culture and congressional relations. As the theater's senior commander, she understood that individual incidents could sometimes have strategic implications that extended far beyond their immediate circumstances. General Thompson had risen through the ranks during a period of significant change in the military, serving in various leadership positions as the armed forces worked to integrate women into combat roles and address long-standing cultural issues. She had personally witnessed the challenges faced by female soldiers and had been instrumental in developing policies and procedures designed to create a more inclusive and professional military environment. The incident involving Staff Sergeant Thompson and Private Martinez represented a direct challenge to everything she had been working to achieve. Her Chief of Staff, Brigadier General Michael Chen, entered the command center carrying a thick folder of documents related to the Forward Operating Base Delta incident. Chen had been working since 0400 hours, coordinating with various staff sections to compile a comprehensive briefing for the theater commander. The folder contained witness statements, medical reports, personnel files, and a detailed analysis of the command climate at the base where the incident had occurred. "Ma'am, I have the complete briefing package on the Forward Operating Base Delta incident," Chen reported. The initial investigation confirms that Staff Sergeant Thompson struck Private Martinez during a disagreement about supply procedures. There were multiple witnesses, and the medical evaluation documented visible injuries. The base commander has initiated formal proceedings under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. General Thompson reviewed the documents carefully, paying particular attention to the personnel files of both soldiers involved. Thompson had been an exemplary soldier for most of his career, with strong performance evaluations and commendations for his technical expertise. However, there were several notes in his file indicating concerns about his temper and his treatment of subordinates, particularly during high-stress situations. Martinez, on the other hand, was a new soldier with an outstanding training record and no previous disciplinary issues. "General Chen, I want you to coordinate with the Inspector General's office to conduct a comprehensive review of the command climate at Forward Operating Base Delta," General Thompson ordered. "This incident didn't occur in a vacuum, and I want to understand whether there are systemic issues that contributed to this situation. I also want a detailed analysis of how similar incidents have been handled throughout the theater." While General Thompson was reviewing the incident files, her counterpart at Joint Forces Command, General William Anderson, was receiving his own briefing on the situation. General Anderson was a four-star general responsible for coordinating military operations across multiple theater commands, and he had been personally involved in developing the military's response to congressional concerns about military culture and the treatment of female soldiers. General Anderson had served alongside General Thompson in previous assignments, and they had worked together on several initiatives related to military culture and personnel issues. When he learned about the Forward Operating Base Delta incident, he immediately recognized its potential significance and decided to coordinate directly with General Thompson to ensure a comprehensive response. "Patricia, I've been briefed on the incident at your base," General Anderson said during a secure video conference between their commands. Given the current political environment and the scrutiny we're under from Congress, I think we need to treat this as more than just a routine disciplinary matter. This could be an opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to changing military culture and protecting our soldiers. General Thompson agreed with Anderson's assessment. Both generals understood that the incident represented a critical test of the military's commitment to the cultural changes that had been mandated by civilian leadership. How they responded to this specific case would be closely watched by Congress, the media, and soldiers throughout the military, all of whom would judge whether the leadership was serious about addressing misconduct and protecting vulnerable soldiers. The third general who would become involved in the Forward Operating Base Delta incident was General David Rodriguez, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel at the Pentagon. Rodriguez was responsible for military personnel policies and had been working directly with the Secretary of Defense and congressional committees on issues related to military culture and the integration of female soldiers into combat roles. General Rodriguez learned about the incident through the Pentagon's daily briefing system, which tracks significant events throughout all military commands. When he saw the report about the Thompson-Martinez incident, he immediately understood its potential implications for the broader policy discussions taking place in Washington. Congressional committees were scheduled to hold hearings on military culture issues within the next month, and this incident could become a focal point for those discussions. "I need a complete briefing on this Forward Operating Base Delta incident," Rodriguez told his staff during the morning briefing. "This case has the potential to impact our congressional testimony and could influence policy decisions at the highest levels. I want to ensure we have all the facts and that we're taking appropriate action to address any systemic issues." The involvement of 3 four-star generals in what would normally be handled as a routine disciplinary matter reflected the broader context in which the incident had occurred. The military was under intense scrutiny from Congress and the public regarding its handling of misconduct cases, particularly those involving female soldiers. Recent incidents at other installations had resulted in congressional hearings, media investigations, and demands for policy changes, creating an environment where any new incident was viewed through the lens of broader institutional issues. General Thompson decided to personally visit Forward Operating Base Delta to assess the situation firsthand. This decision was unprecedented. Theater commanders rarely visited individual bases to address disciplinary matters, instead relying on subordinate commanders to handle such issues through normal channels. However, General Thompson believed that the significance of this incident required direct leadership involvement at the highest levels. "General Chen, I want you to coordinate a visit to Forward Operating Base Delta within the next 48 hours, General Thompson announced to her staff. "I want to personally assess the command climate at that base and ensure that we're providing appropriate support to the victim. I also want to send a clear message throughout the theater that we take these incidents seriously and will respond with appropriate leadership attention." The decision to have General Thompson personally visit the base sent shockwaves through the chain of command. Colonel Anderson, the base commander, received word of the impending visit while he was still dealing with the immediate aftermath of the incident. He understood that having the theater commander personally visit his base represented both an opportunity to demonstrate effective leadership and a potential career-ending scrutiny if problems were discovered. General Anderson at Joint Forces Command also decided to become personally involved in the case. He directed his staff to conduct a comprehensive review of similar incidents across all theater commands, looking for patterns that might indicate broader systemic issues. This review would examine how such incidents were reported, investigated, and resolved, with particular attention to whether victims received appropriate support and whether perpetrators faced appropriate consequences. "I want a complete analysis of how we've handled incidents involving violence against subordinates over the past 2 years," General Anderson ordered his staff. "I want to know whether we're consistently applying appropriate disciplinary measures and whether our policies are effectively preventing these types of incidents." At the Pentagon, General Rodriguez was coordinating with various staff sections to prepare briefing materials for senior leadership. The Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would need to be informed about the incident and the military's response, particularly given the upcoming congressional hearings on military culture issues. The involvement of 3 four-star generals in the Forward Operating Base Delta incident demonstrated the military's recognition that individual cases of misconduct could have far-reaching implications for institutional credibility and public trust. The generals understood that their response to this specific incident would be closely watched by Congress, the media, and soldiers throughout the military. Back at Forward Operating Base Delta, word was beginning to spread that high-level attention was being focused on the incident. Soldiers throughout the base were beginning to understand that the altercation between Thompson and Martinez had triggered a response that went far beyond anything they had experienced before. The prospect of having the theater commander personally visit the base created a mixture of anticipation and anxiety among the soldiers and officers. Martinez continued to receive support from various personnel on the base, including the chaplain, mental health counselors, and victim advocates who had been brought in specifically to assist her. She was beginning to understand that her case had attracted attention at the highest levels of military command, but she was also struggling with the personal impact of the incident and the uncertainty about how it would affect her military career. Thompson remained confined to his quarters, aware that his moment of poor judgment had triggered an unprecedented response from the military leadership. He was beginning to understand that his actions had implications that extended far beyond his own career and could potentially affect military policies and procedures for years to come. The stage was now set for a dramatic demonstration of military leadership and accountability. The decision by 3 four-star generals to personally involve themselves in the Forward Operating Base Delta incident would soon result in a visit that would be remembered by everyone at the base and would have lasting implications for military culture and policy. The remote outpost that had been conducting routine operations just days before was about to become the center of attention for the highest levels of military command, all because of a few seconds of violence in a supply yard. The morning air was still cool when the distinctive sound of multiple Black Hawk helicopters approached Forward Operating Base Delta. Soldiers throughout the compound stopped their activities and looked skyward as 3 aircraft bearing the command flags of some of the most senior generals in the theater descended toward the base's landing zone. The arrival of high-ranking officials was not uncommon at military installations, but the simultaneous arrival of 3 four-star generals was unprecedented in the base's history. Colonel Anderson stood at attention on the tarmac, accompanied by his senior staff officers, as the helicopters touched down in perfect formation. The rotor wash kicked up clouds of desert sand, forcing everyone to shield their eyes as the aircraft settled onto the landing pad. Colonel Anderson had spent the previous 24 hours preparing for this visit, reviewing every aspect of his command and ensuring that all personnel were ready for the most intensive leadership scrutiny they had ever experienced. General Patricia Thompson emerged from the lead helicopter, followed closely by General William Anderson and General David Rodriguez. The 3 generals moved with the confident bearing that came from decades of military service and the authority of commanding hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Their presence on this remote base represented more concentrated military leadership authority than had ever been assembled at Forward Operating Base Delta. Colonel Anderson, I want you to understand that we're here because the incident that occurred at your base has implications that extend far beyond this installation, General Thompson said as she approached the base commander. The way we handle this situation will be watched closely by Congress, the media, and soldiers throughout the military. We're here to ensure that our response demonstrates our commitment to military values and the protection of our soldiers. The 3 generals had coordinated their visit to address different aspects of the incident and its broader implications. General Thompson would focus on the immediate command climate and response at the base level. General Anderson would examine the incident within the context of theater-wide policies and procedures. General Rodriguez would assess the case's implications for military-wide personnel policies and congressional relations. Their first stop was the base medical facility, where they met with Private Martinez and the medical personnel who had been treating her. Martinez stood at attention as the 3 generals entered the small medical office, her nervousness evident despite her attempts to maintain military bearing. She had never expected that her encounter with Staff Sergeant Thompson would result in the personal attention of the most senior military leaders in the theater. Private Martinez, we want you to know that what happened to you was completely unacceptable and does not represent the values of our military, General Thompson said, her voice carrying both authority and compassion. We're here to ensure that you receive all appropriate support and that this incident is handled with the seriousness it deserves. Your courage in following proper procedures and standing up for what's right should be commended, not punished. Martinez felt overwhelmed by the attention from such senior leadership, but she also felt validated in her belief that she had been doing the right thing when she questioned the supply discrepancy. The support she was receiving from the highest levels of command helped offset some of the trauma she had experienced from being struck by her superior. General Rodriguez took detailed notes as Martinez described the incident from her perspective. Her account aligned closely with the witness statements that had already been collected, but he wanted to hear directly from her about the events leading up to the altercation and her experience since the incident occurred. Private Martinez, I want you to understand that your experience will help us improve policies and procedures to prevent similar incidents from happening to other soldiers, General Rodriguez explained. Your willingness to follow proper procedures, even when pressured to take shortcuts, demonstrates the kind of integrity we need from all our soldiers. From the medical facility, the three generals proceeded to meet with the witnesses who had observed the incident in the supply yard. Corporal Wilson and several other soldiers provided detailed accounts of what they had seen, all of which corroborated Martinez's version of events. The consistency of the witness statements removed any doubt about what had occurred and strengthened the case for serious disciplinary action against Thompson. General Anderson was particularly interested in understanding the command climate that had existed at the base prior to the incident. He interviewed several soldiers privately, asking about their experiences with leadership, their knowledge of proper procedures for reporting misconduct, and their confidence that the chain of command would address problems appropriately when they were reported. The soldiers I've spoken with indicate that this incident was aberrant behavior, not part of a pattern of abuse, General Anderson reported to his colleagues during a private conference. However, there are some indications that the operational tempo and stress levels at this base may have contributed to the environment where this incident could occur. The generals then met with Staff Sergeant Thompson, who had been brought from his confinement quarters under escort. Thompson stood at rigid attention as he faced the three four-star generals, fully aware that his career was over and that he was facing potential criminal prosecution for his actions. The weight of having attracted such high-level attention to his case was almost overwhelming. Staff Sergeant Thompson, your actions have not only harmed Private Martinez, but they have also undermined the trust that soldiers must have in their leaders, General Thompson told him. Your behavior violates every principle we expect from our non-commissioned officers and damages the reputation of the military as a whole. Thompson accepted full responsibility for his actions and expressed genuine remorse for what he had done. However, the generals made it clear that his personal regret, while noted, could not mitigate the serious consequences he would face through the military justice system. His case would proceed through formal courts-martial proceedings, and he would likely face imprisonment and dismissal from the service. General Rodriguez used the meeting with Thompson to gather information about the training he had received regarding appropriate leadership techniques, stress management, and the proper treatment of subordinates. This information would be crucial for developing policy recommendations to prevent similar incidents in the future. The three generals spent the remainder of their visit conducting a comprehensive review of the base's operations, policies, and command climate. They interviewed soldiers at all levels, from junior enlisted personnel to senior officers, gathering information about leadership effectiveness, training adequacy, and the overall environment at the installation. During their review, the generals discovered several areas where improvements could be made. While the incident involving Thompson and Martinez appeared to be an isolated event, they identified opportunities to enhance leadership training, improve stress management programs, and strengthen the systems for reporting and addressing misconduct. Colonel Anderson, while this specific incident appears to be the result of one soldier's poor judgment rather than systemic problems, we've identified several areas where your command could improve, General Thompson told the base commander during their final briefing. We'll be providing you with specific recommendations for enhancing your leadership development programs and support systems. The visit by the three generals had a profound impact on everyone at Forward Operating Base Delta. Soldiers throughout the base understood that the incident had attracted unprecedented attention from the highest levels of military command. The message was clear: the military leadership would not tolerate violence against subordinates and would respond with overwhelming authority when such incidents occurred. Martinez felt supported and validated by the attention her case had received. The personal involvement of three four-star generals in her situation demonstrated that the military was serious about protecting soldiers and maintaining professional standards. However, she also understood that the attention came with responsibilities, as her case would likely be cited in policy discussions and training programs for years to come. Thompson was transferred from the base that same day, beginning the process that would lead to his courts-martial and eventual dismissal from the military. His case would serve as a stark reminder to other leaders about the consequences of losing control and using violence against subordinates. The visit concluded with the three generals holding a formation for all soldiers on the base. General Thompson addressed the assembled troops, emphasizing the military's commitment to maintaining professional standards and protecting all soldiers from abuse and misconduct. The incident that occurred at this base represents a failure of leadership that we cannot and will not tolerate, General Thompson told the formation. Every soldier in our military deserves to serve in an environment where they are treated with dignity and respect. When that standard is violated, we will respond with the full authority of our command structure to ensure accountability and prevent future incidents. As the three Black Hawk helicopters lifted off from Forward Operating Base Delta, carrying the generals back to their respective headquarters, the soldiers left behind understood that they had witnessed something unprecedented. The personal involvement of three four-star generals in their situation had sent a message that would resonate throughout the military: misconduct would not be tolerated, and the highest levels of leadership would personally ensure accountability when violations occurred. The visit had lasted only 6 hours, but its impact would be felt for years to come. The incident that began with a disagreement about supply procedures had resulted in a demonstration of military leadership and accountability that would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it and would influence military culture and policy for the foreseeable future. 3 months after the visit by the three generals, the ripple effects of the incident at Forward Operating Base Delta continued to spread throughout the military. What had begun as a moment of violence in a supply yard had evolved into a catalyst for significant changes in military policy, training, and culture. The case had become a reference point for discussions about leadership, accountability, and the treatment of soldiers at every level of command. Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson's courts-martial proceedings had concluded with his conviction on charges of assault and conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer. He was sentenced to 6 months in military prison, reduction in rank to private, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and dismissal from the service with a bad conduct discharge. The severity of his punishment reflected both the seriousness of his actions and the military's determination to send a clear message about the consequences of violence against subordinates. During his sentencing hearing, Thompson had expressed genuine remorse for his actions and acknowledged the harm he had caused to Martinez and to the military as a whole. However, his personal regret could not undo the damage he had inflicted or mitigate the consequences he faced. His case served as a stark reminder to military leaders at all levels about the importance of maintaining professional standards even under the most stressful circumstances. Private Martinez had continued her service at Forward Operating Base Delta, though the incident had fundamentally changed her military experience. The support she had received from the command and from fellow soldiers had helped her recover from the trauma of being struck by her superior, but the attention her case had generated created both opportunities and challenges for her military career. The personal involvement of 3 four-star generals in her case had elevated her profile within the military in ways she had never expected. She had been invited to speak at leadership conferences and training sessions, sharing her experience and emphasizing the importance of following proper procedures and reporting misconduct. While these opportunities were professionally valuable, they also meant that her identity would always be connected to this incident. "I joined the military to serve my country and to be part of something bigger than myself," Martinez said during one of her speaking engagements. "What happened to me was wrong, but the way the leadership responded showed me that the military is serious about protecting soldiers and maintaining professional standards. My experience, while traumatic, has become part of efforts to make the military better for everyone." The 3 generals who had responded to the incident had used it as a foundation for broader changes in military policy and culture. General Thompson had implemented new training requirements for all leaders in her theater, focusing on stress management, appropriate leadership techniques, and the proper treatment of subordinates. Every officer and non-commissioned officer under her command was required to complete enhanced training on these topics. General Anderson had used the incident to advocate for changes in military-wide policies regarding the investigation and prosecution of misconduct cases. His analysis of similar incidents across multiple theater commands had revealed inconsistencies in how such cases were handled, leading to new standardized procedures for ensuring appropriate response and accountability. The Forward Operating Base Delta incident showed us that we needed to be more proactive in addressing misconduct and more consistent in our response when incidents occur, General Anderson explained during congressional testimony about military culture issues. We've implemented new policies to ensure that every case receives appropriate attention and that victims receive the support they need. General Rodriguez had incorporated lessons learned from the incident into new personnel policies that were implemented throughout the military. These policies included enhanced screening procedures for leadership positions, improved training for recognizing and managing stress, and strengthened support systems for soldiers who reported misconduct. The congressional hearings on military culture that had been scheduled for the month after the incident had focused heavily on the Forward Operating Base Delta case as an example of both the problems that existed within military culture and the leadership's commitment to addressing them. The personal involvement of 3 four-star generals in what was technically a routine disciplinary matter had impressed congressional representatives and had been cited as evidence of the military's seriousness about cultural change. The response to the Forward Operating Base Delta incident demonstrates the kind of leadership attention and accountability we expect when misconduct occurs, Senator Patricia Williams, the chairwoman of the Armed Services Committee, had stated during the hearings. The personal involvement of senior generals in ensuring appropriate response and support for the victim shows that the military is taking these issues seriously. The incident had also attracted media attention, with several news outlets reporting on the case as an example of the military's evolving approach to misconduct and accountability. While some coverage focused on the negative aspects of having such incidents occur at all, most reports emphasized the unprecedented response from military leadership and the changes that had resulted from the case. Forward Operating Base Delta itself had undergone significant changes in the months following the incident. Colonel Anderson had implemented new policies and procedures based on the recommendations from the 3 generals, including enhanced leadership training, improved stress management programs, and strengthened systems for reporting and addressing misconduct. The base had also received additional resources to support these improvements, including mental health counselors, chaplain services, and victim advocacy programs. These enhancements were designed not only to prevent future incidents but also to create a more supportive environment for all soldiers serving at the installation. The incident that occurred here was a wake-up call for all of us, Colonel Anderson told his staff during a quarterly review meeting. While we can't change what happened, we can learn from it and ensure that we're providing the best possible leadership and support for our soldiers. The changes we've implemented are designed to prevent similar incidents and to create a command climate where all soldiers can thrive. The soldiers at Forward Operating Base Delta had also been affected by the incident and its aftermath. Many had been impressed by the response from the senior leadership and felt that it demonstrated the military's commitment to protecting soldiers and maintaining professional standards. However, some also struggled with the attention the base had received and the scrutiny that had resulted from the incident. Corporal Wilson, who had been the primary witness to the incident, had been commended for his quick thinking and appropriate response. His actions in immediately reporting the incident and providing detailed testimony had been crucial to ensuring accountability and had been cited as an example of the kind of integrity expected from all soldiers. "I did what any soldier should do when they witness misconduct," Wilson said when asked about his role in the case. "We have a responsibility to look out for each other and to report problems when we see them." The response from the leadership showed that they take that responsibility seriously too. The training programs that had been developed based on the Forward Operating Base Delta incident had been implemented at military installations worldwide. The case had become a standard element in leadership courses, ethics training, and programs designed to prevent misconduct. Thousands of soldiers and officers had learned about the incident and its consequences as part of their professional development. Military academies had incorporated the case into their curricula, using it as an example of the importance of maintaining professional standards under stress and the consequences of failing to meet those standards. The incident had become part of the institutional memory of the military, serving as a reminder of both the problems that could occur and the leadership response that such problems demanded. 1 year after the incident, Private Martinez had been promoted to Private First Class and had received several commendations for her service and her contributions to military culture improvements. She had decided to make the military her career, inspired by the support she had received and the positive changes that had resulted from her experience. The incident was traumatic, but it also showed me the best aspects of military service, Martinez reflected during an interview on the anniversary of the incident. The way the leadership responded, the support I received from fellow soldiers, and the changes that were implemented showed me that the military really does care about its people. I'm proud to be part of an organization that takes accountability seriously and works to protect all soldiers. Staff Sergeant Thompson, meanwhile, had been released from military prison and was attempting to rebuild his life as a civilian. The consequences of his moment of poor judgment had been severe and lasting, affecting not only his career but also his personal relationships and future opportunities. His case served as a constant reminder to military leaders about the importance of maintaining professional standards regardless of the circumstances. The incident at Forward Operating Base Delta had demonstrated that individual actions could have far-reaching consequences and that the military's response to misconduct would be swift, comprehensive, and visible. The personal involvement of 3 four-star generals in what began as a routine disciplinary matter had sent a clear message throughout the military about the importance of professional conduct and the protection of all soldiers. Years later, the Forward Operating Base Delta incident continued to be referenced in military training, congressional hearings, and policy discussions. It had become a defining moment in the military's efforts to address cultural issues and had contributed to lasting changes in how misconduct cases were handled and how soldiers were protected and supported. The legacy of those few seconds of violence in a supply yard had evolved into a comprehensive effort to improve military culture, strengthen accountability systems, and ensure that all soldiers could serve in an environment characterized by dignity, respect, and professional conduct. The storm that had brought 3 generals to a remote base had ultimately resulted in positive changes that would benefit soldiers for generations to come.